Hey everybody, how's it going? My name's Andrew, and this is an AWS tutorial series on setting up Amazon's simple queue service. In this tutorial series, I'll go over the different aspects of SQS, as well as showing you a sample Node.js application that I've created that does things like creates queues, sends messages to those queues, and is able to process those messages. All of the code that I'm going to show you and the commands that I'm going to run are going to be in my GitHub, which I will link below. So let's go ahead and get started and launch an EC2 server that we're going to run our Node.js application on. So we'll go ahead and launch an instance. Ubuntu is going to be fine. A T2 micro is fine for this demo. And we'll tag this as AWS SQS example. And a security group will be wide open, all inbound and outbound traffic since it's just a demo. And we'll launch with a key pair that I've already created. So now we'll log into our EC2. The first thing we're going to do is sudo up. And all of these commands, again, are in my GitHub repository for the AWS SQS example. So the first thing we'll do is run an update. And now we'll run an upgrade. And now we'll run a dist upgrade. We'll run an auto remove. And now we'll install the things needed for our Node.js application, which is Node.js, NPM, and Git. We have to run a quick symlink for Node.js, and this is just because of legacy versions of Node.js. And now we're going to clone the SQS repository that I've created for you. And we're going to cd into that directory. And we're going to run npm install to install everything that we need for the application, which is pretty much Express and the AWS SDK. Now you need to copy the sample config to config.json, and you need to put in your AWS access and secret key in there. I'll do this behind the scenes. Now that this is set up, we can go ahead and start our Node application with node app.js. And you can see we're listening on our public port. So the first endpoint I want to call is for /create. And basically this is going to create a queue named myFirstQueue. So we'll go ahead and go to the public IP address of our server. And we're just going to add in there /create. You can see we got a response back, and we now have a queue URL. So if we go to our SQS and we click refresh, we can see that we have our myFirstQueue. So a little bit about this dashboard here, it'll let you know the messages that are available in your queue, and basically these are the messages that you're able to receive. And the messages that are in flight are the messages that you've received and have begun to process. Those messages that are in flight aren't able to be touched because they're currently being processed. And another thing I want to show you is in queue actions, sending a message. You have things like your message body and the delay of delivery on here, but the really cool thing I wanted to show you is the message attributes. And so in message attributes, you can do a bunch of different things. You can select a type of the attribute that you want to send, and what Amazon SQS will do is it'll validate that that type is correct. So if I wanted to send a string or a number or a binary, so let's say I wanted to send a binary and that was always going to be some sort of PNG or some sort of image, Amazon SQS will validate that for you before sending it out. So the next thing we need to do is we need to copy this queue URL. So this queue URL we're going to use in our app.js. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close out of this and I'm going to edit app.js. A couple of these variables I'm just going to have you edit because they could be different for your environment. So your queue URL, just go ahead and copy that my first queue, and we're going to paste that and save that in there, and we're going to restart our application with node app.js. And so basically what we're going to do here is we're going to now send a message to that queue. So you'll see I have a function here called send, and what this is going to do is it's going to send hello world to the queue URL that you specified when you just edited that application. And we're not going to delay it anything because we want it to be available to us to process right away. So we'll go ahead and say send. And you can see we got a valid response and a message ID. So our message is now in our queue. So if we jump over back to SQS and we click refresh, we should see one message available for us to process. Great, so this is working. So now what we want to do is we want to receive that message from the queue. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this receive function. It's going to look at our queue URL, and it's going to give us a visibility timeout of 10 minutes. Because what we want to do is we want to say that it's going to take us 10 minutes to process this request. And I want to show you that this message goes to in flight. So what we're going to do is we're going to call /receive. And so we can see we have a message here that says hello world. The key thing you're going to want here is the receipt handle, and I'll show you that later. But if I go ahead and refresh in SQS, I go from message available to 0 to messages in flight of 1. So that record is now technically being processed. And this would come in useful if you had some sort of a job scheduling system where you were constantly processing messages in the queue. You'd want to know what's currently in flight and what's being worked on. So if we jump back over here, we need to copy this receipt handle. So this will just be easier if I view my page source. So I need to copy this receipt handle, and this receipt handle, just like we edited the SQS URL, we're going to do the same thing here with our receipt handle. And we're going to close out, and we're going to just edit our app.js. And where it says var receipt equals, we are going to change this to our receipt ID. And what we're going to do with this is we're just going to delete that message. So if we start Node back up, and we jump back over to my GitHub here, what we're going to do is we're going to call this /delete function. And all this is going to do is it's going to look at our queue URL and the receipt handle, and it's going to delete that message. So if we call that, we'll see we get a valid request ID back. We jump over to SQS. Our messages in flight is 1, and now it should be 0. Great, so that's working. So the next thing I want to show you is if we sent in a bunch of messages. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send in 10 different hello world messages into SQS, and I want to show you how you can purge those very quickly. So if we jump back over, I've sent in 10 messages. You can see I have 10 available. And let's say I knew those were bogus and I didn't want those anymore. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call a purge function that will purge all of them out. So you can see that I'm going to purge my queue URL, and I'm going to call this endpoint here. I'm going to say /purge. Got a valid request back, and if I jump over to SQS, I should have 0 messages available. Great. So that concludes our tutorial on Amazon SQS. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them in the comments section below. And please remember to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.